International relations before World War I were based on the idea that war was inevitable and unavoidable. But after witnessing the horrors of war, Woodrow Wilson developed its 14 points to guide international relations towards sustained peace and not war. While the League of Nations may have failed and World War II broke out just 20 years after the Treaty of Versailles, Wilson's ideas for how to sustain global peace have continued into modern-day international relations. At the turn of the century, 1914 to 1918, World War I raged throughout Europe. It was known as one of the most horrific and devastating wars to ever be recorded in history. Millions of people were killed and injured in the war, and the lands once known as beautiful and having bright green fields were later stained with blast marks and rivers of blood. As the war rages onwards, and more soldiers are slaughtered day by day, the Geneva Conventions, a series of treaties that were signed to try and protect soldiers by establishing rules of engagement that are considered humane, were often disregarded, leading to mass casualties on both sides. War holds a great place in history, and it is not to be supposed that men will soon give it up, in spite of the protests which it arouses and the horror which it inspires, because it appears to be the only possible issue of disputes which threaten the existence of states, their liberty, their vital interests, but the gradual improvement in customs should be reflected in the method of conducting war. It is worthy a civilized nation to seek, as has been well said, to restrain the destructive force of war while recognizing its horrible necessities. This is a document titled Oxford Laws on War and Land. It supports the prevailing mentality because it stated that although war could not be stopped, because it was the only way to protect people's liberty, vital interests, and their country, but there should be an improvement in the method of conducting war, by attempting to restrain the destructive force of war and limit the fighting to be between soldiers and not civilians. One soldier, by the name of Wilfred Owen, wrote poems of his experiences in the war. One of his poems, Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori, meaning, it is sweet and fitting to die for one's country, shows the destructive force of World War I from a personal point of view. In this poem, the narrator describes how he witnessed his teammate being poisoned to death by mustard gas after he failed to get his gas mask on in time. He also describes how in his dreams he could witness the horrors of what he has experienced. This shows people not only war could physically damage people, but it could also psychologically damage people as well. The people that were affected by the war psychologically were known as shell shock victims. Shell shock is a term to describe how soldiers that were affected by the war showed signs of psychological damage. The symptoms of shell shock include fatigue, tremor, confusion, nightmares, and impaired sight and hearing. Today, this condition is often referred to as post-traumatic stress disorder. Technology used in a war that not only affects soldiers and civilians, but it also affected the landscapes by obliterating almost everything in its path by using state-of-the-art weaponry and artillery at the time. An image of a village, once known as Passchendaele, located in Belgium, was taken during the war. It showed the mud and misery of the Passchendaele battlefield. Trees were torn apart, craters everywhere, and grass can no longer be seen. Businesses, farms, and homes that used to belong to people were now destroyed. And Passchendaele was not the only place that was affected by this, as the countries, Russia, France, Montenegro, and Serbia, all bore the scars of war as well. When it almost seemed hopeless for the war to end, one man by the name of Woodrow Wilson attempted to end the war by establishing a plan called the 14 Points, which is later known as the Treaty of Versailles. The 14 Points was created to prevent future wars and to create peace throughout the nations that were affected by World War I. Woodrow Wilson, the 28th President of the United States, held office from 1913 to 1921. He was born in Virginia in 1856. Wilson's tendencies towards leadership was inspired by his father, a Presbyterian minister who during the Civil War was a pastor in Augusta, Georgia, and during Reconstruction, a professor in the chartered city of Columbia, South Carolina. We entered this war because violations of rights had occurred which touched us to the quick and made the life of Roman people impossible, unless they were corrected in the war to cure once for all against their reoccurrence. What we demand in this war, therefore, is nothing peculiar to ourselves. It is that the world be made fit and safe to live in, and particularly that it be made safe for every peace-loving nation which, like our own, wishes to live in its own life, determine its own institutions, be assured of justice and fair dealing by the other peoples of the world, as against force and selfish aggression. All the people of the world are in affect partners in this interest. And for our own part, we see very clearly that unless justice be done to others, it will not be done to us. The program of the world's peace, therefore, is our program. And our program, the only possible program, as you see it, is this. This is a quote from Woodrow Wilson's 14 Points. The main point of this quote is to make the world secure and safe once again. But in order to do so, every country involved with World War I, we need to follow the program for world peace. The program for world peace consists of rules to follow in order to make the world a more peaceful place for all. During his presidency, against the warnings of his doctors, Woodrow Wilson made a national tour to mobilize public sentiment for the treaty. Exhausted, he suffered a stroke and nearly died. Tenderly nursed by his second wife, Edith Bowling Galt, he lived until 1924.
The new nations hoped to protect their fragile freedom through the international body that met for the first time in 1920. The League of Nations held its first meeting in a Swiss hotel. Its supporters shared an optimistic belief that a new era of international relations was beginning. They were undeterred by the fact that the Americans weren't there, Congress had refused to join, and that the Russians and the Germans weren't members either. They believed the League could replace the bad old world of secret diplomacy with open discussion. Public opinion would always be listened to. Weak countries would have a voice as well as the strong. Poland's Prime Minister, the pianist Paderewski, called it the dawn of a new order.
On June 28, 1919, shortly after the agreement of the Treaty of Versailles, an organization called the League of Nations was created. The organization was located in Geneva, Switzerland, and the purpose of the League of Nations was to peacefully resolve international disputes and to stop wars. Recent events have shown that the British people's hope that the League of Nations would be adequate for the maintenance of peace is premature. This is a quote from a newspaper that is describing how the British gives reliability into the League of Nations for peace. Although the League of Nations had 58 nations as members, it had shortly failed because 1. It was set up by the Treaty of Versailles, and every nation hated that. 2. The League of Nations was too ambitious about securing world peace, although Russia, Germany, and the USA were not included, and that it had no army. This is a cartoon taken from a newspaper. The cartoon shows soldiers mocking the League of Nations because they think that the program failed. The soldiers are saying, "The League, Pa," fancy suggesting nations could unite for peace. This cartoon was an example of the public sentiment toward the League of Nations at the time. The League of Nations soon failed, and World War II would quickly erupt in its wake. The Second World War lasted from 1939 to 1945, with the Axis powers consisting of Germany, Italy, and Japan being opposed by the Allied powers made up of France, Britain, Australia, India, New Zealand, the Soviet Union, China, and the United States of America. The League of Nations failed, and World War II broke out shortly after. Woodrow Wilson's 14 points signaled a turning point in the way international relations treated war, and has continued to guide world leaders and help ensure relative global peace to this day.